Hello and welcome to the Center for Spiritually Integrated Arts, a Centers for Spiritual Living teaching center. I am Reverend Dr. Raymont Anderson. I am the founder and the spiritual director. Now, as you are sitting there joining us, you may have questions, any number of questions, such as, who am I? How did I get here? Spiritually integrated arts means what exactly? What is a teaching center? Well, what is Centers for Spiritual Living? What is that? What does that even mean? Or New Thought, or religious science, or science of mind and spirit? You may have any number of questions about this specific community, about the parent organization, CSL, our philosophy, our teaching, our liberation theology. Any number of questions. Feel free to send an email. We look forward to connecting more and building our virtual community, our global community. And if you haven't connected yet on social media, feel free to do so. This is your invitation now. Also, did you know that all of our Sunday messages are archived on our YouTube channel? You can watch it anytime. Now, questions about anything, such as becoming a member. What does that mean? What does membership entail? And if you live somewhere far and already belong to a spiritual community, can you be a member of more than one? The simple answer is yes, you can. Just like you can shop at more than one grocery store, you can attend or be a member of more than one gym. We are building beloved community. So you can do both. You can be a member of both. You can be involved with both. That's what being in spiritual community means. So we welcome you. We invite you. We are so appreciative that you have found this community and that you have joined us today. We bless you. We love you. We welcome you. Live long and prosper. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the rest of our Sunday message. Love you. Connect with you soon. Blessings. Namaste and greetings. Your greatness is showing through your gentleness. Yeah, I know that's not what it says on the slide, but I want you to breathe that in. Your greatness is showing by way of your gentleness. Because that's sort of what we're going to be talking about today, is the idea of how gentleness equates with your divine greatness, in essence. Gentleness is not just letting yourself off the hook and giving yourself a free pass, a pat on the back, self-congratulatory kudos, nor is gentleness some form of weakness, timidness, meekness. At its core, gentleness requires awareness. It requires compassion and gratitude. It requires these things because it is, in essence, gentleness. As Dr. Holmes says, whatever is true about God is true about you. The essence of this is who you are. It is what you are. That means it must be where you are right now. Breathe. Being gentle takes courage, and yet this is a very worthwhile exploration of what does it mean to step in courageously to our gentleness. Gentleness affords us the reminder that each of us, that you are so much more than you give yourself credit for. You are so much more than you recognize, so much more than you realize, so much more than you are showing up as. And yes, there is pain, there is sorrow, there is anxiety, there are all of these things. And yet, gentleness gives us the space to be present to it all in order to navigate, in order to be able to open ourselves up, to see things differently, to transform what needs to be transformed, to transcend what needs to be transcended, to be a healing presence for whatever is asking to be healed. Whatever it is, gentleness gives us the capacity to do the work, to engage the practice. Are you ready to step in and allow your gentleness, your greatness to show up? If so, then we need to talk about this idea of gentleness. What is, if I asked you in your own words, what does it mean to be gentle? What is gentleness? In your own words. Okay. For some of us, we may have come up with words such as weakness, to be demure, to be docile. But what about shifting that a bit from a different perspective, where gentleness means being kind, being merciful, having a sense of serenity, being loving, forgiving, understanding? What about those words? So when we think about gentleness and how it references, ties into our greatness, then we see kindness, greatness, compassion, greatness, All of these things directly tie into what it means to show up as the very incarnation of the universe itself, because it is a kind universe. I understand that there are things that happen within. I got that. But the universe itself, the energy of, is kindness. It is tranquility. Breathe. And even when there are what we refer to as natural disasters, tornadoes, hurricanes, earthquakes, there is part of that where we are invited to ask how much of the natural disaster is the result, the effect of some man made cause, versus, yes, tornadoes are a part of nature. Hurricanes are a part of nature, yes. And yet, because of the amount of pollution, the amount of fracking, and all kinds of other things, have we impacted the natural balance of, whereby we are, in part, responsible for the increase of natural disasters. Just pause and let that marinate in without judgment, without saying, yes, it's their fault, yes, it's our fault, without any of that. It's simply recognizing that even within the scope of the natural disaster, there is a gentleness from Mother Nature. Breathe. Because if we're really going to do this work, then we are really invited into a new way of walking gently on the earth. Dr. Holmes says, if we are to have an active faith, the faith of God instead of merely a faith in God, we could stop right there. What does it mean to have the faith of God? Rather than faith in God? Our thought must be centered in universal mind. We are convinced that under divine law, all things are possible if we only believe and work in conformity, alignment with the principles of that law. Such a faith does not simply spring fully orbed into being. It's not like Athena springing forth from the skull of Zeus, fully armored and fully grown. It's not, such faith does not spring fully orbed into being, but rather it grows by knowledge and experience. So if we were to just take this one passage, this is a whole series of messages in and of itself. Like we could do a full month just talking about what is active faith versus passive faith. What is life affirming faith versus non life affirming faith? What does it mean to have the faith of God? If God has faith, what does that faith look like versus having faith in God? What does it mean to have faith in anything? If there's universal mind, how do I know that my thoughts are centered in it versus on the periphery? If we're going to reference the center of, the centeredness of, then it implies that there is a space outside of the center. Because if there's only the center, then aren't all of my thoughts centered? Or is it they're centered, but they're not centered in universal mind? Are all things possible if we simply believe? What am I invited to believe? What does it mean to believe? Yeah, see, you get my point. We could go on and on just from this. And that is our invitation. That is part of our practice, not just to simply go by as the message goes and there's the quote and that's cute and that's cool, but to pause and revisit. What is this quote? What is this passage? What is this image? What is this slide actually offering me to explore that deepens, quote unquote, linguistic convenience, that deepens my ability to walk the walk, to practice principle? Now, if we're going to talk about faith, then we realize that faith must be kind. Faith must be serene. Faith must be, because it's what we're talking about, gentle. Faith is not a thing of force. So then the question says, well, if I'm going to have this life affirming faith and I'm going to show up in my greatness by being more gentle in life, what will my life look like by me being gentler? What will my life look like by me being more understanding, more forgiving, having more serenity in my life, having more kindness in my life? What will my life look like? What will my relationships look like when I have more compassion and I am more human slash humane in my interactions in the world? What will my life look like? What will my life feel like? What will my life be like? When? Because I'm sure we could agree that there are areas in our lives where we are not gentle with ourselves, not forgiving, not understanding, not humane. And very often, as we are given the opportunities to choose to be kind or not to be kind, that is the question. To be forgiving or not forgiving, that is the invitation. To be more humane or inhumane, that is the invitation. Then we sit at the crossroads and we ask, well, what is my why? What is your why? The reason I ask this, the reason we are positioning this question is we often get more concerned with the why, the reason of it all, rather than a more effective, life affirming way of asking the questions. We think of our reason for being as being some God ordained, whatever that is, rather than your reason for being, your why, is up to you. And it's not even, let's not even ask the question of why per se for a moment, but let's ask what. So not why am I here, but ask what am I here to do? What am I here to share? In the same way, if I ask why is that crayon red? Can you answer it? I mean, yeah, we may scientifically be able to say, well, because as light hits it, all of the rays and the spectrum hit it. And yes, we could scientific. Yes, there is a reason. But suppose you don't know the reason. Does the reason why it is red change the fact that you could say, what can I use this red crayon for? Why is water wet? Why do I need water to hydrate myself? You don't need to know the why. And many of us, we're not the scientists that can explain the why. So we ask, rather than the why is it wet, what can I do with this water? What do I choose to do with the water? Why is the paint going to paint blue with the paint? What am I going to use blue paint for? So rather than asking, why was I born? Ask, what am I choosing to do with my life? See, one of these questions gives us greater capacity to really expand. The other one keeps us stuck. I mean, and there may be some movement, like in quicksand, there's movement, but it's not as liberating as realizing there's a different level of understanding that I now have volition, that I can now act based upon my own choosing. Dr. Holmes says, there is something about you and me that is cosmic. It is universal. It stretches over time and space. So let us learn to think better of ourselves. And I would say, let's remix that and say, let us learn to think cosmically about ourselves, to think universally about ourselves, to think more expansively of ourselves, to think of ourselves in a more life affirming manner, because that's gentle, right? A more life affirming, it's more in alignment with our divinity. And if it's in alignment with our divinity, then just simply by default, it is gentler. It is more understanding. It is more aware. It is more loving. It is more forgiving. It is more enveloping of all of the things that gentleness represents as our greatness. So let us learn to think, and not even just think of ourselves in this manner, but to live in this manner. Breathe. Reverend Dr. Barbara Waterhouse offers, if you could have done something differently, you would have done something differently. And yet you didn't. So you couldn't. Very simply, this is an invitation to say, rather than spiraling down into the deep, bottomless well of regrets and the woulda, coulda, shoulda theme song of regret. I would have done better if I coulda. I should have done better if I could. Rather than spiraling down that, she is offering us the opportunity to be gentle with ourselves, with the power to not simply, well, since I can't do better, I'm going to go ahead and eat all 12 of these cookies. I mean, why not? It's where I am. And that very well may be where you are. But it doesn't absolve you from doing better. It doesn't absolve you from evolving into a greater awareness, a greater level of love and compassion for yourself. It's not simply throwing up your hands and saying, well, I'm an alcoholic. I'm going to do I'm going to go ahead and drink. It's the best I can do. Is it though? Well, I'm addicted to porn, so, but are you though? Do you have to be though? It may have been what was yesterday, but does it have to be today? Do you have to yield to being a workaholic today? Do you have to continue being a racist today in this moment? Are you not also an infinite being with the capacity to evolve and transform and change when you know that you have the ability to do so and you have the means and the tools to do so? To what degree do we choose to embody the authority of the law of mind and action, cause and effect, and our divine nature? There are going to be things that we are going to quote unquote regret. We regret spending so much or going on that vacation and splurging. We may regret the argument that we got in, regret sending that email, regret putting the child in the middle of the divorce. Yes, we may regret ah, knowing now what if I could have, yes. But once we are aware, we can change from this point. Can't necessarily change. The money's gone. It's now circulating in the city of Paris, Paris. Money's gone. The wallet's empty. So now the option is, so now what am I going to do? The email is sent. Now what am I going to do? How do I come back to that place of serenity, gentleness? Come back to that place of forgiving myself for whatever that was that transpired, gentleness. How do I learn to be better in order to do better? What am I invited to know in order to change how I am being, which shows up in whatever it is that I'm doing? Breathe. Because that's the invitation that Dr. Maya Angelou is offering us. When you know better, when you are aware of better, you get to be better, which means you get to do better. And by better, it means you get to do that which is more life affirming, that which is more in alignment with your truest, highest self. Brene Brown offers us authenticity is the daily practice of letting go of who you think you are or who we think we are supposed to be based upon the indoctrination of culture and society. It's letting go of that in order to embrace who you truly are, who we truly are. It's this awareness of this is who they expect me to be. They expect me to be the star football player because it's what all of my brothers did. It's what my uncles did. It's what my father. That's not what I don't want to do. I don't want to be the star football player. I want to do ballet. Then embrace ballet. Now, does that mean that there's not going to be there very easily? There may be their contention, their disapproval. Yeah, that very well could show up because we know it does. You are such a disappointment, which is one reason why many of us choose inauthenticity. We choose to embrace who they tell us we're supposed to be. We embrace who they say we're supposed to be. We embrace that to keep things calm, to not rock the boat. But that is one of the most non-life affirming things we could do. Now, there are phases, because for some that is done for literally for survival. But the goal is eventually there will open a space where we now have the invitation to step into the authenticity, to release who they say we're supposed to be, to now embrace who we truly are, and to move through this process in a gentle manner. So even when the LGBTQ person does not have the ability to safely come out of the closet, they are gentle with themselves enough to say, this is not who I am. And for the sake of my safety, I must hide behind a mask and behind the armor of heteronormativity. There is this part of me that knows this is not who I am. And this part of me is getting stronger to say there will come a time when I am ready to embark upon the journey of my true self. And throughout all of this, ideally, we do so with a level of gentleness. Because as the Dalai Lama says, compassion is something that is like a sense of care. How are we caring for ourselves and for others? A sense of concern for ourselves and others as they and we experience the various difficulties and pains of life. How do we do so? With compassion, nurturing, loving support for ourselves and for others. Because as Jack Kornfield says, if your compassion does not include yourself, it is incomplete compassion. Being compassionate to somebody else, but not yourself, is incomplete. So how do you offer yourself loving, compassionate support? When we practice the science of mind and spirit, not as a separate activity, but as the very life that we live, it affords us a certain awareness that gives rise to our ability to be what we are. And what are we, you ask? We are individualized incarnations of God. And by being actively aware of this and living it, our doing flows naturally. It's a natural byproduct of who we are being. It flows naturally in such a way that the need to know why is less important. We don't need to find the why. What is more important is that we choose. For example, why create a world that works for all? Why is that the vision? Versus, I choose to be a part of the life and legacy that liberates the planet as a world that works for all. Because we can ask, why create a world that works for all? And we can ask a million people and get a million different answers and not feel in alignment with any of them. But the moment we choose our own reason, what and why, for me, what does it mean for me to create a world that works for all? What do I choose to be in a world that works for all? How do I choose to show up to create a world that works for all? See, all of these now change the energy of manifestation. Breathe. Because right there is One of our greatest challenges and opportunities, because what we are inviting is responsibility and accountability. I am responsible for how I show up. There was a time when, and I was still responsible, but I didn't know that I was responsible. So I would say, they made me mad. And we may still do that for linguistic convenience, but they made me mad. He made me sad. She made me cheat, etc. And now we are saying what they said had this response, and my reaction was anger. And now that I know, I can see the whole thing playing out in front of me, like watching the Super Bowl in instant replay. I can see where the ball went and where the fumbles happened, and what I can see it all. I can see clearly now. It's in slow mo. So let me look. That's what was said. Okay, why did it have it triggered me, but how? What exactly was the button that was oh, and then I got angry, punched a hole in the wall. Okay. Oh, I see it. I see it now. Okay. And then we get to choose a different response. We get to choose a different level of how do I now show up? So much, in fact, that the next time that or something like that is said or done, I am able to have a different reaction and a different response. But it starts with taking on a level of what is mine to do based upon who I am being. Now, how do I go and do it? How do I live that? Breathe. This week's declaration or affirmation, I will say it first. And if it resonates with you, I invite you to declare it with me on the second go round. Gentleness is part of my true nature. I choose to express it in my daily activities. Together. Gentleness is part of my true nature. I choose to express it in my daily activities. So it is. This week's journal questions and questions for the Thursday night study group. What does gentleness mean to you now? After having gone through today's message, what does it mean to you now? In what ways are you invited to be more gentle in your life? Number 2. What are some areas in your life where you could use, where you are invited to explore a change in your perspective? Maybe a change regarding religion or politics, money, poverty, caste, the caste system. Where are you invited to at least explore, if not change yet, explore a change of perspective? Number 3, what does showing yourself gratitude look like? What does showing yourself kindness look like? Showing yourself grace, what does that look like? Showing yourself compassion, what does that look like? What's the evidence of showing this to yourself? Number 4, what is something that you have regretted that you have not yet released? Still holding on to the regret, the guilt, the shame. And breathe on this one. By not releasing it, what have you been given? The holding on to it is giving something, which is why we still hold on. What is it giving? What is it affording to not forgive? It's giving us something. What is whatever that guilt, the shame, the regret? I'm not ready to let it go because it's giving me something. What is it? And are you ready, or at least approaching a readiness to release it now? What would it mean to release it now? Number five, yeah, we're going to have six today. Number five, how can you use forgiveness in your life today, both as something to offer and something to receive? Inhale, exhale. Forgiveness to offer, forgiveness to receive. How can you do so? What does it mean to do so? And then lastly, what do you deeply love about you? What do you love deeply about yourself? Breathe. And we enter into that space of prayer, simply breathing the love, the appreciation, the joy that comes with this thing called life. Knowing that there may be times when we don't necessarily feel all that loving, supported. We don't feel kind or kindness, not as something to give, not as something we receive. We simply don't feel it. And yet, we breathe in this moment knowing that even if we don't feel it right now, even if there are moments when we don't feel it, it still exists. It is still available. And so, even in the not feeling, when I feel alone, I know that there are people, there are groups, there are support groups, there are all manner of ways to engage in this thing called being social. And yet, where I am right now, I feel alone. I feel lonely. I feel isolated. But I know that that can change because I know that groups and people and social events and fellowship, I know that these things exist, even though what I feel is what I feel. I am gentle with myself through the process. Now, as I speak these words, I know that what I am speaking of and for and about myself is of and for whomever these words apply to. Because whatever it is, it may not be loneliness and isolation, it may be grief, it may be fear, it may be physical pain or emotional pain, it may be any number of things. And none of them negate what we feel and the truth of what is. And so we are gentle with ourselves through the process of being aware, being understanding, so that we are able to expand into our cosmic universality that is the truth of our being. Breathe. Knowing that the law says yes, breathe. Knowing that that yes means that this prayer, this message, these words are already in motion to shift and change all that creation is right now. Breathe. That we gently receive our wholeness. We gently receive our completeness. We gently receive our perfection. We gently receive love and kindness. We gently receive the beingness of this truth,
And in so being it, it is also what we offer and express. It is the truth of who and what we are. It is how we are living as answered prayer. That's what is, and so it is. Namaste, blessings, much love and appreciation. So there is no after message fellowship today, but we will return next Sunday. So we will see you soon. Much love and appreciation.